Hi, and welcome to week 3. We'll be discussing environmental values in regards to water management, with a case study of the value positions concerning irrigation and infrastructure developments of the Ord River in Western Australia. We'll assess how these values led to specific approaches to water management and identified solutions for the Ord. The management of natural resources such as water, a scarce and vital life-giving resource, is a complex and multidisciplinary pursuit. Rather than considering it as a siloed objective, water management is value-laden and riddled with complexity inherent to interlinked social, economic, and ecological spheres at various scales. It is necessary to examine these diverse value positions in developing a shared water management plan. The Ord is a prime example in case. Various stakeholders from different social and economic spheres have had divergent and even conflicting perspectives and interests relating to the future of the Ord River irrigation scheme. How can we define value positions and how do they determine management approaches? There are a number of value systems and specific attitudes as well as basic determinants held by stakeholders. These may be political, religious, and cultural backgrounds, education and societal status, levels of wealth, legal or social restrictions, and other pressures. Various attitudes or paradigms range from the more anthropocentric value placed on natural resources, meaning human-centered, to more ecocentric values which consider the environment and natural ecosystems as having a right to exist and be healthy in their own right, apart from the resources rendered to human society. These various backgrounds, social settings, and pressures help individuals and groups to form interests and perspectives that in turn direct them to certain valuations over a complex issue such as water management. Stakeholders then prioritize socio-economic factors, determining their preferred environmental solution and outcome. In the case of the Ord River, we have a complex catchment area in the East Kimberley of Western Australia that commenced as a government-initiated development in the early 1960s, with the Ord Dam, aimed primarily at providing irrigation to farmland. These developments found their origins in a user or utility value approach. This can be likened to that of a colonialist perspective that seeks to tame the land and harness resources for human benefit, specifically for agriculture and livestock. Since early European settlement in Australia, however, social and cultural values have taken some interesting turns over the decades. Locals are seeing the river system differently to the original early colonialists in that land and water resources are valuable outside of just their economic contribution. The Ord is seen as a beautiful water network that is to be sustainably managed for future enjoyment, not just as a resource to be exploited. The catchment also provides fresh water to inhabitants within many kilometres of the area. Due to such changing social and cultural value positions of local inhabitants, there are a number of disparate voices regarding the investment and infrastructure changes occurring in the Ord. Economic, social, and future sustainability approaches all have their own lens on what the problem is and therefore identify different solutions and management approaches. Interested groups concerned with the future of the Ord include companies contracted for infrastructure developments, farmers concerned for the survival of their cropland and livestock, as well as other local towns and indigenous peoples whose cultural values have been greatly impacted by the Ord developments. Contracted construction and management companies value the economic benefit and longer-term future for business brought by large government investments into the infrastructure changes of the Ord catchment. The federal and state governments value the success of these management plans with large sums of money that they've invested. Locals and other interested parties are no longer satisfied with natural resources managed from a top-down, centralized approach. The future of the Ord is questioned beyond simply what it can provide to nearby developments, and stakeholder knowledge sharing is increasingly important to future planning and dialogue. The Miriwang Gadjurung, the MG people, are the traditional owners of the Ord River area and have a substantial dependence on the river system. Only in 2003 did the MG people's rights and native title agreement get ratified between the WA government and the Commonwealth, thereby acknowledging the years of negative impacts and effects on the MG people. There is still a far way to go with regards to better integration of the MG people in the future planning and co-adaptive management practices for the Ord River. A number of reports recommend far greater inclusion of the indigenous locals in the management phase of the project. The The 1960s saw a single command and control approach adopted by the government of the time in order to access and control the water system of the Ord, to the exclusion and sometimes detriment of other stakeholders. Today sees the continued repercussions of these decisions and requires inclusive joint learning to steer policy forward. Another aspect for inclusion in cross-boundary resource and knowledge sharing. In the case of the Ord River, it crosses the state boundaries of the Northern Territory and Western Australia. Typically, the Northern Territory section hasn't been involved in Western Australian state policy, whereas the transboundary system would be greatly benefited from such an approach. These strikingly different value backgrounds and social hierarchies and interests add to the complexity of the wicked problem of water as a resource. Certain value positions are at one end prioritizing intrinsic and spiritual value of the river system, whereas others, the infrastructure developments, represent economic growth and prosperity. As we've seen from the Ord River catchment and infrastructure developments, value judgments or positions from different stakeholders play a determining role in the formation of different agendas, approaches, and identified solutions. It is important for these values to be identified and included in the overall adaptive management plan. Thanks for listening to this presentation on the Ord River system and the contrasting stakeholder views and values. See you on the discussion boards this week to chat further about value judgments and positions in environmental management. Thanks.